Good morning. This is the Economic Development Committee session. We are going to be talking about the Small Business Support Services, new competitive grant processes. And today we're going to have Councilmember Lorian Sells virtual, and we have the county executives team here joining us. And with that, I'm going to have staff to please kick us off.
Morning, members of the ECON committee. Just walking through the Small Business Support Services, NDA, new competitive grant processes, and a follow-up on the budget work sessions. Just by way of background, and as you can see on page 1 and 2, the county executive had recommended only a 3% inflationary adjustment for this NDA, and that totaled $1,713,075. But as we were working with county staff to put the packet together, we sort of realized that that was not an accurate description of how the NDA would be used this year. Instead, they proposed a competitive grant process for some of the amount. The bulk of it would still go as non-competitive awards to existing contractors, but potentially in different amounts based on an evaluation of their contracts. Like I said, they would also create a new competitive grant process as well, and the committee eventually agreed to that. For a total of $1,700,000 and updating the budget verb because it was no longer an increased cost. This was a new program effectively. And then the county or the committee also requested an update from county executive staff before dispersing funding from the new proposed approach. Just also to note that there was no update since the budget, so the question of which contractors get which budget amount was not discussed during FY25. Although the council doesn't approve specific contracts, historically they have reviewed what was proposed from the NDA, and that was not a detail that was available during the budget work sessions. So now turning to page 2 here, where we can talk a little bit about the new approach. I'll give a quick summary and then turn it over to them for the explanation of the process. Sorry, I think it might be easier and more instructive to just look at the table, but basically I think that's just the easier way to walk through this than the text of the packet. So I'm going to share my screen here because I created an updated table than you see at the packet. Here we go. Yep. Okay, so let me just put this. All right, so as you see on page 3, there's 3 columns. I've added 3 more columns just to sort of fill out some of the information here, and then the council, county executive staff can speak to it. You see in blue is what council staff added. The first column shows the FY25 approved amounts for these non-competitive awards. This was the total operating expense for the NDA in FY25. As of a few weeks ago, and I have the specific date, I think it's noted in the packet, each of these contracts, some of these contractors had some unspent balance. You can sort of see the difference between the approved and the unspent balance as of a few weeks ago in June. Then you can see what they are appropriating from the $1.7 million that was allocated to the NDA. That's in the 4th column, FY26 SBSS funding. And then the 5th column shows what they've agreed to enter into a contract with these contractors, some of which is the FY26 appropriation, and some of which reflects some of the rollover or unspent balance from FY25 for a total contract amount. And just because there was some questions about this in between the packet posting and this work session, there's a question of why the unspent balance plus the appropriation didn't equal the contract amount. I think that's a good question to ask the county executive staff for clarity. Our understanding is some of the unspent balance was drawn down further in the past few weeks, so that might be reflected, but just to get a full understanding of what's included in the contract and reflecting the dollar amount would be a good question for county executive staff. I'll leave this open to just walk through the rest of the packet and then turn it over to them. As I mentioned, they also have, in addition to the appropriated amount that's going to these non-competitive awards for $1.357 million of the $1.7 million, another $150,000 is going to go to an RFP for business support services targeted to assist federal contractors in the county. And they're going to put out an open process to provide grants to service providers for that. And then also another $150,000 is an open solicitation for proposals for cohort training to assist small businesses located in the county. and they have a full RFP process for how they will dole and evaluate those applications and dole out the money, and they'll speak to that. I'll also note that they've pointed out they will spend approximately $20,000 to sponsor networking events, also potentially through a competitive grant process. The actual process, you may want to ask for some clarity and details from them for that. I would just note, those, I think the competitive grant process numbers are estimates, because that's $320,000 plus the 1.357 million adds up to slightly less than 700, with the presumably with the expectation that some of the contracts could, ultimately exceed that amount. That's pretty much the packet. And with that, I'll just turn it over to County Executive Staff to walk through the grant process.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali, and thank you, Chair Fanny Gonzalez and Ms. Palcom and Mr. Glass for our discussion today. This continues our discussion from the spring, and we really appreciate the engagement over what is a shift in how we manage small business support services. As you all know, these are the services to provide training, counseling support, and in one case, micro grants to small businesses and entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their business in Montgomery County. And I emphasize contracts, because these are contracts, not grants. There's a history of how organizations started to receive contracts from the county, and we understand that there are others in the universe in Montgomery County who can provide like services. And this year we are, as we mentioned in the spring, we are pivoting over the next year to engaging with our current partners, who we greatly appreciate. Each one of them does fantastic service, to opening the door for other contractors to come in and provide services. I recently became aware of a great program by the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce a few years ago, where they did 2 cohorts of 30 businesses each. Programs like this could be something that we want to explore with the remaining unspent balance that has enabled us to free up resources to start making this pivot. I do have to say, and I appreciate the role of the committee in working with us. Your advice has been very important to us in forming this program. I do want to apologize if there was any messaging at any point that said this was a council-only initiative. This came from the administration and has been talked about with you, but messaging that went out that said council was setting the dollar amounts was incomplete and inaccurate. This year, and to my left is Nadia Klute, our Business Center Manager. This year, we've engaged with all of our contractors. We've had some discussions back in April with all of them before we came to you about the pivot and the need to redeploy the unspent dollars, because it's a significant dollar amount. We are looking at this year 2 solicitations. One is a solicitation for a contractor to provide support for federal contractors, to focus them on services and engagement and networking that will allow federal contractors, give them better access to private sector contracts and other levels of government contracts. We've had a good engagement with county business leaders over what this should look like. And we actually have a draft solicitation that's waiting to go, pending your input. And the other solicitation we hope to offer is a solicitation it's an open solicitation for entities that want to provide one-time coaching, cohort training, consultation, and education event training for small businesses. This one is, probably a week away from being, fleshed out as a draft. The third piece that council staff mentioned was an idea that's come about through our discussions with some of you, members of this committee, because networking plays a very crucial part in how small businesses engage with other businesses. And not just that, but with county government leadership, folks like Nadia and our procurement department and our permitting department. And we want to explore, similar to how the regional centers offer neighborhood enhancement matching funds, some sort of, with whatever small pot that's left over, some sort of way to match, the efforts of organizers who are putting together networking events that go beyond their membership or focus on their small businesses, that engage with leaders and other businesses in Montgomery County. That is the least formed idea that we have, but it's something that after members of the committee have raised, something that we're looking at seriously to implement. As the chart, so things are moving on this chart, and I appreciate council staff had the best information they had a few weeks ago. More invoices have come in. We're still processing a number of invoices. They're still within the 30-day review period. So these numbers might change, but overall, we have the capacity with the work we're doing to do these solicitations.
Thank you for that. When you say that this number can change, which I can totally see that, do you have an idea of how much this will decrease, this amount that we have in front of us? It's 1.8.
Yes, so good morning, council members. So based on my
Can you state your name, please?
Nadia Clute, Business Center Manager.
Thank you.
We are estimating about 175,000 out of what is showing right now, that is fiscal, out of the 1.1 that is showing. Because if we go line by line, the $238,000, based on the invoices that I have received, I have remaining $67,000. So you can see the difference between the 238 now is down to 67,000. So a lot of these numbers have changed. The University of Maryland Small Business Development Center, they only invoice the county executive office twice a year. So we just received another invoice from 65,000. So there will be a zero balance. So that's just to give you a case-by-case scenario that all of these organizations have submitted now their last invoice for the services that they provided through June, and we're in the midst of processing all that.
And I believe the first number you mentioned was for the first contract for the Black Chamber of Commerce of Maryland.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And before you continue, I just want to say, Mr. Harmon Espada, thank you so much for those remarks. And I just want to reemphasize that we did have these conversations during the budget, and you are doing exactly what we agreed on. There have been no cuts at all. We're talking about funds that have not been used and us being responsible and making sure we also provide opportunities for other groups. We have heard from different local chambers, and we have mentioned this in committee that they want to have a stronger partnership with the county. And at the end of the day, we'll have the same goal of helping small businesses. And we're just following through that. So I just want to thank you for that. You can go, are you going to go through each one of them so we can provide input? You said you have 3 different RSPs.
Sure, I'm happy to. I appreciate that question. So the first RFP we have is going to be for a single contractor to provide support for companies that do business with the federal government, to help them explore permitting opportunities. I'm going to my scope of work here so I can talk about it. To provide workshop training sessions, minimum of 10 in-person workshop sessions a year, one-on-one coaching sessions, networking opportunities, and of course with everything, with this one and other contracts moving forward, we'll be looking for feedback from participants and to be able to track their success when they leave the programs. So that's the federal contractor RFP. And any questions from the committee? And for the open solicitation, so an open solicitation is, we have a pot of money, we ask for proposals, and we can, based on the responses, we can give money to multiple groups. It's not just awarded to one. This is a program that I've spoken to some of our contractors and others about. This is the best place for partnerships. And I've already heard some great feedback from some of our local chambers who are working with other partners who can help provide services. So the second open solicitation is for general business support services, including one-on-one coaching, consulting, and technical assistance, expert one-on-one consultation, technical assistance. So this is more of consultants who have more of a deep knowledge in a specific field and the ability to answer questions. This is like a legal, or I think what's a co-op and how can it form in Maryland? That's an expert level of a.
You're gonna have to explain that one now. Before we started this session, I have two different groups that have come to me asking me how they can set up a co-op as a business model, and we are digging into it because I don't think we have never done it in Maryland, or at least in Montgomery County. So we're investigating how that's a possibility. So that's the feedback.
So, an expert level, there's a fine line. We can legal consulting and CPA consulting. This is not services. You're not going to see a CPA who's going to do your taxes. A CPA will come in and say, this is what's changed in the last year, or something your business should be aware of. That's what we mean. We want cohort training is probably the most important and impactful thing we can do with this money. We've had great success. The AMBER program is a blue ribbon program. We need to define more ways to do programming like that with more businesses. And that's what this is intending to get us to do. And we have a menu of our thinking on how much each of these costs based on our experience with our existing contractors. So that's solicitation. And as I said before, we have it for the matching funds for business networking. We have the example of the community engagement cluster program, where if a neighborhood wants to do an event, they can apply for a small grant of $2,000 or so that matches their own sweat equity and their own investment. So that gives us and some of our criteria we're thinking about is it's something that adds value, whether it's a networking event for a type of business with leaders in their business, or it's an event with Ash Shetty, or it's an event with others who have expert level access to procurement on the state and local level or in the private sector. That's what we're thinking about. How do we enable more of those to happen?
Thank you for that. We're going to start with questions. If we can have Councilmember Malcolm kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I think this is great. I think it's exciting. I think from the we have compete and non-compete programs here, funding going places. The federal contractor, I think, is a no-brainer. We do need to fill that gap in terms of what's happening with our federal contractors. I think that is. I don't know if it's a short-term thing or not, depending on what happens with the federal government. So I appreciate that one. And the cohort services, I think, is really important. As you said, we have models available that have been very important, that have been very successful. I do want to mention that, I have had conversations with some of the people in the compete bucket concern about the one-on-one counseling going away. That's not happening. I think it's important that the one-on-one counseling is critical. It remains critical, but the cohort model, it's just a different. They're two different services. They're two different skill sets. Both are important. So I and I really appreciate looking at how we can increase cohort programs for new entrepreneurs. The network support, great. I think that when you look at how that money's going to go out, of course, geographic distribution of the money, but I also think that when you look at it, you have to think about the calendar, because these kinds of networking events happen throughout the calendar year or throughout the fiscal year, and there will be asks up until the very last day, because so when you're determining how to actually fund the programs, I think making sure that the people in the first 3 months don't get all the money, right, kind of thing. And of course, size. I think that the most savvy organizations will be aware that this money is available, and they will have staff on hand to get the money. And it's the small organizations that are scrambling and may not be aware. So I think that what that outreach is, and maybe when you start looking at the funding, and that's what's great about the community engagement money, is they really are small entities that get that money. That's even $200 is important for them, right? So so that's just my comments on that. And then I think from the compete, the non-compete awards, the awards that we have historically funded. When we talked about this in May, there is this issue of capacity of whether an entity has the capacity to effectively use all the funds that they're granted, and that's a question that only you can answer from looking at them and working with them. I don't want and I think I mentioned this back in May, I don't want to get into this scenario where organizations are thinking of this as a use it or lose it scenario, because we don't want that. That's not the most effective use of dollars. On the flip side, we don't want to have unspent balances that could have been used for other things during the year. So those are basically comments on this, and I think it's great that we're going to look at additional services to fund for small businesses.
Love it. And I just want to reemphasize what Councilmember Balcon said about the public engagement. She's so right. As soon as you have everything available, please send it, not just to us, but to the entire county council, so we can send it out to folks. There's one person in the audience, I'm not going to mention her name, but she's sitting right there. And she's here because I saw her yesterday or 2 days ago at an event, and I told her what we were going to be discussing. And that's how she found out. Otherwise, she will have no idea. She will have known that we were doing this. So very key.
I thank you so much, Chair Fanning Gonzalez and Councilmember Balcom. We're thinking the same way, and I think we'll be having discussions with all of our existing partners, because the goal is to pivot the entire program to one where you submit a proposal and it gets evaluated. When I've met with each and every one of them, we've talked about partnerships. If you lack the capacity, maybe there's another organization that under your brand or in partnership with your brand can provide the services. So don't, as I think Councilmember Glass said during the budget season, don't go buying T-shirts. Let's make sure that this ends up in more services to our businesses. It's not, there's a formula for overhead. This is not a program to fund overhead. It's a program to fund services and the cost of providing them. So that's, I hope next spring or later this fall, we can report on our discussions with the partners, because we want to move, we don't want a scenario where we're liquidating $500,000 every year of a small budget item. We want to make sure that every dollar is being spent for our small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate this conversation and appreciate Mr. Hartman reminding me of what was said during the budget because it is absolutely true that we know that happens, and as there are leftover funds, departments and agencies figure out how to spend down those funds. But this, while I do believe it is a problem, even within county government, we have to make sure that when we're using taxpayer dollars for certain programs with very specific goals, that that those monies are allocated and actually spent towards that. So thank you. A few different questions. One regarding the federal workforce training. And Patty, nice to see you here too. And so, you know, I'll since we're talking about Patty, I will simply say that we met when I went to a meeting, if I could call it that, a gathering of former federal workers and contractors who wanted to know what the county is doing for all of us. And so thank you for your engagement and for being here to listen to this conversation. It's probably your takeaway that's the most important aspect of this conversation. And so to that point, there are various funds, not only here, but then also in WorkSource Montgomery, that are going towards that. Can you clarify roles, responsibilities, where different funding sources are going and how they differentiate from each other?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question, Councilmember Glass. The WorkSource Montgomery program is tailored towards employees who have been let go of either federal contractors or the federal government itself. They're working on job placement and job training services, focused largely on highly skilled and highly trained people, which is a very unique challenge for WorkSource. So they are. I wish I had their two-pager. I'll circulate to everyone, but they've hired the staff person for the effort. They're working on solicitation for partner assistance, and they hope to soft launch in the next month and a half with a hard launch in September. So that program is coming together. This program are for the businesses. The small businesses that relied on the federal government for contracts and now are seeing things change and shift and are having to rethink their business models. This is focused on that. You know, how do you reinvent yourself? What other contracts should you be going for? Who do you need to meet in those other places on the state or local or private sector level to work through that procurement process? Federal procurement is a very different animal than even county procurement, and it's something that we want to engage directly through a contractor to offer this service.
Just to pick up on the procurement aspect, I'm not sure even if my colleagues know this, but so I'll say it. When this council was starting and we were creating this committee, trying to figure out what this committee's portfolio would be, there was great conversation about procurement being part of this committee. But because much of what procurement does is the nitty-gritty of government operation, it stayed within the Government Operations Committee, but even in this acknowledgement, recognizing how tied they are. So future conversation, perhaps. The only other question I have is regarding the two different types of funding opportunities. There's the RFP, which is the competitive, and then there's the ongoing. Could you say that again?
The open solicitation.
Correct. We have been modernizing our systems so that organizations across the nonprofit platform, across the nonprofit community, are more regularly updating and providing information and reporting out some of the work that they do. But as we see what's happening within the grants management office, how do we start this process with lessons learned from grants management, whereby there are some concerns and issues with actually getting the money out. And then there's other issues where organizations have competitively requested funding and no longer get it after a year, 2 years, 5 years. And so there's some expectation setting and some logistical work that I think needs to be done. Curious if you've thought about that, and it really is a lessons learned perspective from other areas of county government.
Thank you again for the question. I'm very familiar with the discussion over.
We all are, yeah.
Our first expectation is that these contracts would be for multiple years, for maybe a 2-year time frame out the gate, so that
Providing the continuity.
providing continuity. We are aware that procurement takes time, which is why we've jumped right on and our staff at the Business Center has done a great job starting to put together the solicitations. It is something that's going to be competed. We'll have criteria that will be clearly spelled out. We'll have an open session before these get put out there with potential and existing partners to come in and ask questions. So we're not just throwing out a solicitation and hoping people will understand what it is. As we do today, we will fold everyone into our regularly scheduled meetings that we're kicking off to discuss what they're seeing in the market, what challenges they're having as organizations, what partnerships can exist. We have great partners, and I don't want to put out there that we'll be looking at it's all or nothing. You either get a contract this year, or you don't get a contract next year. If an organization does great work but lacks capacity, we need to work through that. We need to ask the questions: where can we find the capacity? Are there others? And I have to say, I had a conversation last week before the council session with a few of the chambers about their desire to work together and collaborate, and also collaborate with others. I don't know if you saw, there was a big meeting of all the chambers, including the Maryland Black Chamber and the Black Collective, that we want to partner together on all sorts of things. So those are the sorts of partnerships we're looking for, because we feel the partnerships will make these more sustainable. But I guess my point is, we want to get these contractors out of their silo of I provide a service and it's just me within my four walls, and include them in a broader ecosystem. Not to overuse that word. These are the opportunities we're seeing out there in the marketplace. How do we continue to evolve this program with your dialogue to better serve our businesses? It's a known issue, and I apologize for going along on that, but it's something we're committed to working through.
Thank you. It is a known issue. It has to be talked about, because even over the weekend, we all got emails about some procurement-related decisions, not related to your portfolio, but more in the after-school educational space. Yeah, there's a lot. And so in addition to that, the grants management office, and so what they are all different, right? But what they all have in common is they are places where county government provides financial support for services. That's the commonality. And so the more we can get out of our silos, to use that terminology, right, and learn best practices from what other departments and agencies are doing right and not right. And again, we're just trying to get ahead of ourselves, because we don't want to have this conversation, and I know you don't want to have this conversation should it be needed in any way. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's going into it, and perhaps it's even being explicitly clear as can be, that the awarded contracts are only for a set period of time. and it's got to be on every page, highlighted, so that everybody understands that this is a 2 or 3 or however long year program, and the guarantee after that is whatever it might be. And so I think that might be the most important takeaway, drilling into every recipient's understanding that this is a contract with a expiration date, able to be reapplied, right? And if you think I'm going long about this, it's because we need to say it on every single page, probably. So I appreciate the conversation. More communication is always better. Thank you.
Wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Glass and also with the comments from Councilmember Balcom. I think as follow-ups, so we look forward to seeing the officials, RFPs, the official announcements for all these projects, so we can help get it out there, as you said, and then after that, perhaps in the fall, or we'll talk to see when we can have a follow-up conversation to see how it went, right? What are the outcomes for each one of them? So is that okay? Yeah. Perfect. So I don't think we have anything else to. Yes, you have one more thing.
I just want to address one more issue because Council Member Sales sent in some questions for us, and I think there's a very important question she asked that we want to address. And there she is.
There she is. We have not seen you before.
But she asked a very important question: how do you determine success? What are the metrics for this? Metrics for business support. It's a difficult thing to do because there are the facts out there is the majority of businesses that are going to form today won't be here a year from now, and in 5 years even fewer. So it's providing the support where an entrepreneur or someone with an idea can work through and have a better business plan, or maybe have the advice and networking they need to have a better chance at success. But some of the best advice you can provide to a business is when to close shop. When how do you protect yourself? How do you make the exit from your current situation? But I think to her question that she posed to us by email, is that we want to get engaged with everybody who provides this service for us, who engages with businesses, to have a standard survey so that businesses who are engaged are telling us and telling them, was this worth my time? Did I learn something? Is there something that I wanted to learn that I didn't? So we can constantly plug that back into the feedback, and for everybody to use the same engagement survey, so that that comes to us, so that we can track these businesses, and we can communicate with them as they go forward. But I think that was in response to your question, Councilmember Sales. It's how do we get qualitative metrics from businesses, recognizing that quantitative metrics on success, we can measure it, but it may be elusive in determining, were more businesses created because of this program? Were more businesses successful? We want to track that over time through the Business Center CRM. But more importantly, we want to make sure that the programming we make available is worth their time and has been important to them.
Is Councilmember Sales, do you have any other questions before we close?
Yes, thank you. I did have just a few more questions. Most of them have been answered, and thank you, Ken, for responding to my emails over the weekend. So I did want to understand the timeline for the FY27 criteria for the non-compete, and when you think you'll be back before us to share that information.
It sounds like I'll be back before you in the fall to talk about FY27 criteria, and we'll be ready for that.
Okay. And then how will the county assess any unmet needs or any gaps that are not being addressed by the current cohort of awardees?
Thank you, Councilmember Sales. It's through that solicitation, through that feedback form that we want everyone to provide, because one of the questions we want to ask is, how can we better serve you? What programming would you like to see that you haven't seen? And we want to make sure that all of our partners are aware of what everyone else is doing, because if they have, if they run into a business that could use a micro grant, for example, we have to make sure that referral connection is made. Because I think we're in our silos. We don't always know what the bigger ecosystem looks like, and our intent is to change that through our monthly dialogue with our partners.
Okay. And then the FY26 funding amounts, have they been confirmed, dispersed? Are they encumbered? Still being negotiated? What's the status? Because I know you're still receiving invoices.
We are, but all the contracts for FY26 have been signed. So what the number you see for FY26 is solid.
Okay, perfect. No, that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody's time, and this committee has been adjourned.